All right, guys, welcome to our back-to-back episode of the podcast. This is probably one that we anticipate will be heavily listened to and probably picked apart. And first of all, just kind of a callback to the initial CMS call letter. And when did we first start talking about this? This was probably mid-November of last year.
November, December,
So 5 months ago. And we basically said back then that we pretty much think that everything that they had talked about doing was going to happen, that it was a foregone conclusion. And
signed, sealed, delivered.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. And to be honest, I think we were basically right on that. So
yeah, the only thing that some people have said is, well, if you noticed in the last week, they kind of softened their tone a little bit on the delivery back, but not much.
Yep. So, you know, as is typically the case, they came out with this call letter. It's 1,300 pages, and it is a behemoth, okay? And I think a lot of people wanted to take a knee-jerk reaction. And prior to last week, let's take it back to last Monday, we'd kind of heard leakings from the rumor mill in the industry that many FMOs were in a deep panic, and that they're, you know, we'd heard rumors that people were saying, this is the end of FMOs, this is the end of override payments. And there was a lot of doom and gloom and consternation. And we still weren't really convinced, and we didn't really have a strong knee-jerk reaction even when the letter dropped. It was kind of like, although when I first started reading, everybody starts Control F searching the document and reading the summary, there was some initial cause for concern, right? Because and let's jump right into it. There's a few components that we're going to talk about today, but the biggest one as it affects agents is the actual agent compensation and FMO compensation component. And the first thing was, it says the removal of administration overrides. And that phrase right there, quote unquote, the removal of administration overrides, everybody kind of searched that and freaked out about like, oh my gosh, that means FMO overrides are gone. That's going to be cataclysmic. And FMOs were freaking out about it. So, you know, we'd heard, you were in DC. I was waiting with bated breath. We thought it was going to drop on Friday. It actually dropped about 3 o'clock our time, Mountain Time. And I started reading it immediately with some of our executives. And, you know, we're just kind of picking through and searching. And there was a little bit of a brief panic. And then I went back to the top of the section that starts talking about compensation, and I really started reading it in context, right? And I think that the context of what they're referring to as additional compensation and as administrative payments, if you read it in the context of what they were referring to, I was not worried at all.
Right. And
so you start reading it, and they start listing specifically a couple of things, right? I thought it was very interesting that they basically lumped FMOs in with TPMOs, which we never really...
I mean, carriers on our contracts on the paper, they'll give me a TPMO contract. And so it is, we have been kind of lumped together. So an FMO is in the same classification, as you will, as like a lead vendor. The way that the government sees it is same.
Yeah. But to that point, we got lumped in even with some of these essentially lead vendors and lead aggregators as third party. And so it was kind of like we got lumped in with all of the bad guys as FMOs in the eyes of CMS. They didn't, and it was also still very obvious that CMS didn't really understand what FMOs do, the value, the necessary services that we're doing for the carriers and for the brokers. And, you know, reading through that specifically stated it. And like we've talked about before,
Do we want to talk about that and the whole bill and the bipartisan sponsorship before we keep moving on while we're there?
Yeah, let's give a summary of that.
So the reason that this is important is now, and this was a theme at the Medicarians conferences, it was like, guess what, everybody, let's all clap, because we've now found, you know, some people to sponsor a bill, you know, that we're going to bring this to the floor, and we're going to have a bill brought forth where, you know, they can vote on it, and essentially, you know, we're going to try to have FMOs removed from that TPMO classification as like a carve out. And everyone's cheering. And first of all, I'm sitting here thinking, number one, ain't no way you're going to get a bill done, drafted there in front of somebody. And number one, most bills die in committee. Most people don't understand how that works. And again, the majority of bills never even actually go to vote because they don't make it past committee. So I'm very skeptical that something like that is going to happen right now. Get in front of somebody, pass committee, get voted on, and prevent us from being classified. If anything, that's down the road.
Yeah.
So even if they do something like that in the future, I don't think that solves anything in this calendar year for what we're talking about.
Yeah. So let's set what CMS is stuck on was the fact that agents were beginning to receive alternative compensation models in addition to what's called FMV, fair market value, right. The amount set by CMS of what you can get paid on a compensation plan. And really what's happened over the past 10 years, as we know, is that FMV has actually become woefully inadequate for an agent as far as compensation goes. Yep. Despite what CMS thinks in the government, the commissions that agents have been receiving were far outpaced by inflation and cost of doing business. And so in a vacuum, all these carriers started trying to come up with alternative compensation metrics to add more money onto there without violating.
And not only that, but it's also very deceptive, and we spend a lot of time talking to new agents about it too, about the proration of commissions too. And all they're looking at is a grid, usually showing, oh, hey, compensation is 600 and what is it this year?
611 for a new to Medicare.
Okay, it's
306 for renewal.
Exactly. So it's very deceptive because then there's the thought that every single policy that an agent sells, they're going to get paid 611 or 306 on. And you all listening to this know that that is not the case. If your policy is effective for a 1/1, you get that. Or if it's a brand new to Medicare, but that's only a certain percentage of your policies, and the rest of your policies are prorated to a reduced amount, right? And so that's the other thing that I don't think that they really understand that. And so when you start to think about the amount of production or sales that somebody has to make to actually generate enough money to have an income and live on, and also be a business professional and have compliance and, you know, put into lead generation or marketing and grow your business, it's
and buy nice clothes and pay for leads, and if you're driving around, pay for gas and pay for a car, and, you know, all these other administrative business expenses, yeah. You know, and so that kind of existed in a vacuum. So number one, compensation was already far falling behind what it was. And anybody that's tried to get into this industry over the past 4 years has known how difficult it is. And we talked in the prior podcast about the shiny object in this industry that attracts agents in is residual income. Building a book of residual income and having that lifestyle is very, very attractive, but most people are not able to make it to that end goal anymore because they're not able to make it through. You know, people call the industry 8% nation or 90% wash out. So people are not making it, and this industry is not attracting in the best and the brightest right now, which it should be, right? Don't you want the best people helping people with their health and their wealth? Of course we do. So things started coming in on the line items of, well, this isn't compensation per enrollment, but this is an HRA, a health risk health risk assessment payment, or a VBE, a value-based enrollment payment. And then we started seeing things like,
one thing that they didn't like about those is that it was done by a non-clinical person.
Yeah, which we can get into that too. It seems, you know, the HRAs are very non-clinical. It doesn't take rocket science to ask if someone has diabetes, right? You know, or do a basic assessment checklist. But what's going to happen is that's going to be done on a clinical side, and it's going to be more expensive for the carriers, which is why the carriers liked it in the beginning, is because it helped with their, you know, stars and HEDIS and their MIPS and all that stuff. And
or it's going to create another entity out
cottage
there,
industry,
which is going to spin up a whole slew of people who have like a CNA or these RNs with their NPI. And they're going to have a whole nother division that just does the HRAs from a clinical side, and it's going to drive up the cost.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a division like that. You never know. But so that's kind of the environment that happened. And so carriers were starting to add extra stuff. Like, well, here's marketing dollars, right? Because it costs money to gen leads. It costs money to be compliant with all of these regulations that CMS has already put in place. And so carriers started adding these different buckets of money, like mileage reimbursements or a marketing reimbursement. And what happened was the carriers started tying those to a per app basis, right?
And different varying amounts.
Correct. Yep. So like tiered amounts. And in aggregate, CMS started going, hey, you are creating additional per app compensation models. And if one carrier is providing you an $80 HRA and a $100 marketing bonus, and this other carrier in the market is not, then you have an outside financial incentive to put people on that plan, right?
Well,
which is fair.
And to be completely honest, like the pendulum, it's always swinging, and it got a little bit too far.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened, to where some of the HRA or VBE payments got kind of high. Add that to, like you said, some marketing funds or reimbursements, and suddenly there were people out there making as much or more or close to the same amount in revenue from these other forms of payments than they were the actual commissions of the plan. So,
and it does say in this letter, as part of the Biden-Harris commitment for fairness and competition in business, which is hilarious, they're reacting to this, right?
Did they give like that fairness to all like the small business owners during COVID?
Nope, it's only fairness to business. I'm yet to see how this is fairness to small businesses, but either way. So admittedly, there became some alternative compensation, and it could sway. And then what happened was some of these small and mid-sized carriers or gigantic carriers that didn't want to participate in that, or some of the mid-level regional ones started kind of crying foul, even though a lot of them are the ones doing some of these payment models. And so the government wanted to step in, and eliminate this polluted environment. And even on the FMO side, carriers started doing it with like co-op dollars into these big entities, and they started calculating it down to a per app, like per enrollment basis, what's called a CPA, a cost per acquisition. And that's just how smart business people do business. That's how you run financial models, is you go, what's my return on investment?
Yeah, like it's input output, right? Yep. Is like, what is my hard cost expense for this? What's my profitability? What's my margin if I'm acquiring at this? And it's always about having the numbers pencil out, right? So if this is where my expenses are, and again, an expense for an insurance company is the broker commission and the FMO commission, and those are all expenses, and what you're getting in revenue, and you're always trying to balance those, right? So you're right, like on those CPAs. And so there's a lot of carriers who were willing to fork out money as long as, if the numbers pencil out, let's just keep it going, right?
And it's an acquisition cost, right? Which is what every business and no matter what industry you're in, you're trying to acquire that business. What do you have to spend to acquire that revenue, right? And so the government got it in their head that was polluting or tainting the industry. And so all of those things, if you start reading this letter in context, it refers to those things and starts talking about those as administrative payments, alternative administrative payments, okay? And so you start reading through the letter.
So to quickly summarize, because we got like 5 more things to talk about, basically they gone. All those things are gone as far as the slush fund type of payments at the moment are gone.
Well, and originally they'd proposed to replace that with a laughable $31, right? And everybody universally panned that as ridiculous to replace those overall all-in services for $31. And so CMS was magnanimous enough to increase that by $100, right? And then or
to $100.
Yeah. Also $50 on the back end. So as an example, and it gives this in the document, right now for a new to Medicare enrollment, FMV is what's called $611 for most states. And so theoretically, you would get an additional $100 on that. So it'd be $711.
Yep.
And on the back end, the renewal rate is $306. Plus, there'd be an extra $50 in perpetuity.
So it would go to $356, yeah.
So go to $356. Now, what they have not determined is, and this is usually what comes out right around this time in the next 60 days, is the FMV for 2025. So we know that's tied to MLRs, right?
We'll see it in June or July.
So we know and we know what MLRs are, the medical loss ratios, and they are bad this year. In other words, the profitability, the margins on those are bad. So when it's tied to that, we're going to see a very modest increase in compensation for that. So expect FMV for 2025 to go up very small, let's say,
or not.
And then they'll, whatever they determine FMV to be, then they'll add that $100. So they give an example of it going to $726, so going up.
Yeah, and by the way, the carriers are all very squeezed with the rates for next year, so they're all under a lot of pressure there financially. And again, remember, the broker commissions and FMO commissions fall under the 15%, not the 85%. It's part of that
of MLRs,
ratio, of the MLR ratio. So when you have those carriers, squeezed and under pressure too with their rates, it makes it pretty hard for them to be in an environment to increase FMV too.
Yeah, and plans are going to be downgraded. We'll talk about that later as we get more towards.
We better get going then.
Yeah,
we got a lot.
Well, I am saying another podcast on that. So what's yet to be determined is what FMV is going to be for next year, and then add $100 on it. Also, they didn't spell out in here if there's going to be still an additional amount for those states like California and Pennsylvania, but it's assuming that will be a higher FMV as it's been in the past. Which, while they're reviewing all this compensation, we think it's, if anyone that matters hears this, it's ridiculous that California and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, DC have outsized commissions supposedly for a higher cost of living when there are other areas and metros that have just as high of a cost of living now or sometimes greater. That just makes no sense.
Yeah, when that was established, however many years ago, 2000 and a few
15, 16?
No, before that, 7, 6 years ago. It's a different environment almost 20 years later. The fact that they haven't revisited that is a little odd to me, and I don't know that they're going to in this, but while we're discussing, it's probably something that if it's not on the docket this year, I'm sure that it will be as they're reviewing contracts and compensation and everything else. It's probably they would probably have the same question and go, why is it different here? Why is this a different amount versus this state? I got to imagine that that's going to be a conversation point.
Yeah, and who knows, there's probably some sort of political carve-outs or constituencies that they need to make happy in those particular states. So now when you're reading this compensation and everybody's still wondering, does this affect FMO overrides? Okay. And then what all of the private equity groups and all the FMOs are stating, everyone keeps saying 591 and 592.
Page 591 and
592. Page of the document. And at the bottom of that, there's the comment, they put in the comments of commenters, which are probably these private equity groups or brokerages like us, or maybe it could have even been an agent like us.
Or it could be a payer, like a carrier, but somebody submits comments back to CMS.
Correct. And this is what it says. It gives the example of the compensation, and then it says several comments expressed confusion about whether this payment is an all-in cap that is intended to include all fees paid by MA organizations to an agent, broker, or other TPMO or /FMO, and what that would mean for payments related to marketing activities. And then it says the response. This proposal and all agent broker compensation rules are limited to independent agents and brokers and do not extend to TPMOs more generally. So that's the one saving grace. That's the one phrase that entities like us and carriers in general are kind of using as the exculpatory, exclusionary phrase that is saving FMO overrides from being nuked. Yep. And it says, therefore, this policy represents a limitation on payments in excess of those paid under compensation only for commissions paid for enrollments to independent agents and brokers.
But to be clear, just so that everyone's listening and hears, yes, FMOs are going to be able to receive commissions moving forward. It does not guarantee that the hierarchies, the structures, the dollar amounts, and the ways that they're being administered are, the legacy or the old way of doing it. It doesn't really say that that's just the way that it's going to be. And also, we can pretty much, with a broad stroke, say that at least the slush fund co-op marketing just funds just a flat dollar amount that an entity gives to an FMO. Those are gone. So
correct.
If you're an agent out there listening,
especially tied to when they calculate it to a per dollar enrollment amount,
right. So if you're an agent out there listening or a small agency and your FMO is giving you co-op marketing funds and they're just kind of, the carrier gives them a tranche of cash and they're splashing cash to everybody in their kind of downline or their group and they're just giving you money. I'm just telling you, those days are over. They're completely over. It's not going to be a thing moving forward, and it's done. So really, it's the money. There will be money for agents, like we're talking about, in these dollar amounts, and then the FMOs, like ourselves, or TPMOs, whatever you want to call it, distributors. It doesn't affect it, but it doesn't also really allude to what those are going to shake out to be also.
Correct.
So,
and I'll read this last statement, and then we'll kind of talk to what we're hearing from high-level carrier partners.
we got to wrap, because I got to talk like 7 more things.
Yeah.
We're
So
20 minutes on
it says, though we are continuing to consider future rulemaking in this space, our current policy does not extend to placing limitations on payments from an MAO to a TPMO who is not an independent agent or broker.
So
or
that's
activities.
a Medicare Advantage organization.
Correct.
Is what that means.
Correct. That are not undertaken as part of an enrollment. Okay. So what Dan's talking about is these per app dollar amounts, like co-op. For example, you write 1,000 policies, we'll give you $100,000 equal, divided out equals $100 per app compensation. Those type of arrangements are almost certainly going to be gone.
Right.
Now, whether those are a more nebulous, hey, buddy, we're going to give you $100,000 to your FMO for generic marketing purposes,
Now listen, this is what I'm going to say too, and this is probably how we should end it before we talk about the other elements of the letter, is that I think, though, that CMS is kind of leaving some things like up in the air and a little ambiguous, but I also would say that carriers are going to be creative to try to find ways to still get funds to certain organizations. However, but I also think that if really quickly, like, organizations just go, oh, well, we're going to call it this and just change it and do that instead, then guess what? I feel like they're going to just come back next year and just have a heavy hand again and just, okay, I guess what we were trying to achieve and accomplish didn't work, and you didn't hear what we were doing. So here comes the sledgehammer.
Correct. Yeah. One of our key carrier partners said, they left it a foot wide, and if they have to go narrow it down to 6 inches wide of a term, then they will, and so that's the overall message. And so a lot of agents and FMOs and carriers were kind of taking a victory lap with that exemption, but things are going to change nonetheless. Okay. And so are we worried that like all compensation to FMOs is going to go away? Absolutely not in any way, shape, or form, but it's going to change how it's earmarked. It's going to change some of these things. And some of our carrier partners have even talked about going back to, was it the Senate Finance Committee or the Ways and Means Committee? Ways and Means, I believe. And maybe universally changing the GA, MGA, SGA structure, making that either a universal thing or doing away with that entirely and just paying one lump sum and maybe standardizing that on the FMO side. Those are
either that or tiering it out to where individual carriers can't have discretion as to, just because they have different CPAs and different budgets and different flexibility within their margins, they can't change the compensation. It has to be standardized.
Correct. And if I had to guess what I think a lot will become more standard, there are some carriers that they just pay the top of hierarchy and they leave it up to the FMO or the top of hierarchy to determine how those downlines are compensated
and how that gets distributed
and how it gets distributed. And I would guess that will become the standard. That will become the norm going forward, and that you will probably see the slow removal of standardized GA, because each carrier is different too.
But some of them don't like the fact that there's 9 tiers of distribution down, and the murkiness and some of the, I don't want to say shady behavior, but just how convoluted it becomes. And I mean, how often is it that an agent doesn't know that they have an FMO, they think they're direct, or how much is it that they're like, oh, I'm with this FMO, and they don't know they have 3 rungs in their hierarchy there, and they don't even know the value that they're providing. So I think that, I think they're going to start cleaning that up a little bit.
Well, and you have scenarios where an FMO might have a contract of X amount of dollars per app on their override amount that's 3 times higher than another carrier in the market.
Right.
And so how do you make the argument? And this is what one of our very important key partners who does have a lot of sway and influence in the industry said, how is that not a compensation mechanism that drives the behavior? Because it does. It's like, well, if you're the FMO and you have a contract that's 3 times higher than this other one in the market, you and your agents are going to obviously be financially incentivized to sell that carrier.
You're going to steer that way, yeah.
And you're going to steer that way naturally. And so we do anticipate that there will be some changes and some standardization of that kind of stuff. Overall, I believe the dollars remain the same to the top of hierarchies for those who are identified as being able to continue to provide value and follow the rules.
Yep.
But I do think there's going to be an opportunity to pull back and reevaluate a lot of nonsensical contracts that exist in the space.
Well, it's just like, look, the economics are such, right? We're in this environment like we've been looking at where there's just not the money as the government is looking at how they're going to be paying and compensating the MAOs, like the Medicare Advantage organizations, next year and moving forward. It wasn't the rate that they wanted. That's why all of the carriers and the payers, that's why their share prices have been falling for investors. You know, their stocks are dropping, you know, because the environment for funding doesn't look good next year. So with that, then they're going to have to go back and pay all these organizations. And that's what I'm saying. Don't be optimistic about high increases in LTV next year. It's just the money's not there.
Correct.
Right? So is that going to create an environment for them to kind of say, hey, the cash isn't there, we need to kind of renegotiate and talk about the dollar amounts tied to these contracts? Probably.
Well,
right?
well, remember, these are all publicly traded entities who have shareholders and a board. And what is the main goal? What is the main driving factor always? Making money. And how do we course correct? And how do we, you know, the days of the free loosey-goose COVID money from the government and all this excess funding are gone. In fact, there's probably going to be some clawing back of that. Yeah, the belt's getting tighter.
Let's go into that. So we've talked for 25 minutes on compensation. That's probably enough for this episode, at least, because I want to cover like at least 3 or 4 other elements.
Yep. So talk about maybe quickly kind of how they're going to possibly claw some money back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to, you said it. And so I was saying, well, the other thing that they're in there when you read through the document is they pretty much said in there without saying it that, hey, we're going to go back and audit even more these past years, and we're going to claw back some of these payments that we've already sent to health insurers or to carriers, right? There was a look back period where the government could go back and audit payments. And if you really follow everything in the industry, there's always, you know, lawsuits popping up every couple of years between the government and certain insurance companies. And there's differences of opinions on what, you know, criteria they should be doing and coding and what their reimbursement rates should be and how much they should be getting. And there's a number of health insurance companies that have had these lawsuits over the last couple of years, right? Now, granted, I will tell you, usually the health insurance company has won those lawsuits, not the government. However, they put in the call letter that they want to extend that period from 4 years to 6 years. So the government is wanting to extend that period back even further. Imagine they want to go back 5 and 6 years later after the businesses, these health insurance companies, have already ran their business essentially, cashed those checks, invested that capital, made all those decisions, and they're going back now, not just 4 years, but 6 years to these health plans. So, and you wonder why their stock's not performing well right now, you know?
Well, it's always, they're always political pawns and gamesmanship that are being played. Like there's this attitude of, well, healthcare is getting excessive. We're spending X amount of dollars on, you know, these massive healthcare companies, and then selection year, and we're going to look back with a fine tooth comb and make sure there's no, you know, there's
no bloat, no fraud. Boy, we got to keep them in check. And it's like, oh God, whoa,
and it's like, well, don't look on the other side of the house.
A little bit of irony. You know? Boy, we don't know what happened to that $1 billion in defense contracts, and we lost all that other, you know. But hey, let's look at, you know, healthcare. But I will say too that the other thing is commenter, and in that section where commenter means, you know, the payers who have made comments or pushed back on that and said like, hey, some of it that they're auditing and want to look at are caps, you know, HEDIS or caps payments, and caps are obviously like those surveys that they're sending to your members about their overall satisfaction and sentiment of the plan and outcomes. And anyways, so HOS caps, all those things, you know, sometimes the government is establishing the criteria for that. And essentially, sometimes the payers don't agree with the modeling or how they've arrived at that, or the sample set that they take, or maybe they don't agree with the exact thousands of members that they sent the surveys to and the responses they got back, because they feel like there's a flaw in the methodology of how they did it. Or like, let's say they targeted one area that was more of a lower income demographic. Well, that might skew the responses or the data. So the commenter, or probably the payer in this case, pushed back and said, hey, we want to be able to appeal these outcomes for these payments, because we won't agree sometimes with how you went about it. And the response was, sorry, too bad, so sad. You won't be able to, because we're already running it through the NCQA for a secondary party to verify this, and so we don't care. We're not going to allow you the ability to appeal it. So that was like, oh, okay, well, interesting.
Yeah, so that compounded with the fact that, funding is going to be kind of in a retraction this fall. Plans were kind of saying, brace yourselves for some pullback on plan benefits and possibly some service area reductions in some areas and counties that have had high risk and haven't been profitable. And what I've heard from 2 carrier partners now is that there's going to be enough of pullbacks with benefits, and we'll talk about the SSBCIs real quick too. Yep. There's going to be enough of a pullback in benefits that a lot of carriers are trying to use the summer to have the agents train and go and educate their consumers, their beneficiaries, on what's going on in the industry. So when these benefit changes hit in the fall, they're not freaking out and wanting to jump off that plan and join another because they lost, their dental got cut a little bit, or what.
To provide more perspective to that, just imagine, so to set the table correctly, you look at these incremental increases of benefits year to year to year. And for you to think about it, if you want to really know like what our plan's going to look like this fall, just if you have a sales kit or an enrollment kit kicking around in your closet from like 2019 or something like that, go get out that sales kit from 2019 or 2020 from 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And whatever that benefit structure looked like in plan design, that's probably similar to what it's going to be. And I say that because think about pre-COVID era. That's that's probably the correct kind of mindset of what the plans are going to look like. So to go back to, this evolution of year to year where you're adding, grocery cards and utility cards and, these crazy dental benefits, and there's unlimited dental and like all these, there's no chance that all these ancillary, we call them like what do we call them? The sexy benefits, everybody. So
get an Xbox controller and
or you can get this budget to buy a new e-bike or your season pass skiing, or like all these crazy,
or a robot pet.
Oh my gosh, the kitty or the puppy pet for loneliness. I mean, all those kind of
Teddy Ruxpin.
Yeah, it got to a point where they felt it was so out of hand that candidly, it's going to go back and revert to the focus of care. And I think that
core benefits,
it's going to go back to core benefits of what's actually keeping people healthy. Now, granted, I do think that we have enough data and information that people who are lower income and stuff, when they have grocery cards and can eat healthy food, it affects their health. I think that obviously people's dental well-being, if you have an infection or something with dental work, it's going to affect everything in your body. So I think there's some of those benefits that are going to stick around, but I think the sexy pizzazz benefits are going to be like nuked for the most part. Yeah. And like I said, just going back to core stable benefits, actual management, CCP, real true coordinated care plans, with just some little bit of extra benefits there. Like perhaps we're going to keep a fitness benefit, perhaps
and dental, vision, hearing.
Yeah, but
they'll be reduced. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's what you're look forward to that. But I think that's going to be sticker shock for a lot of the consumers, and they're just used to getting like better and better and better every following year. So when they get their annual notice of change, their ANOC letter, it's going to be like sticker shock. And I think it's going to create a lot of people shopping the market this year, but they're also going to be disappointed because, there's not going to be these really sexy alternatives for them to get on. It's going to be kind of everyone across the board.
Yeah. And we heard there, that one carrier in particular that had a pretty big gain is going to be affected by this, outsized.
They're going to be hurting by the TBC.
Yeah, hurting more. So talk real quick about the SSBCIs and how those, with the how the transparency is changing and how we think those are pretty much going to be going away as well.
Yeah, for the most part they'll go away. I don't see a place for them anymore now because
the SSBCIs are supplemental social. what is it? What does SSBCI stand for? Supplemental Social Security,
I'll think of it in a minute as soon as the podcast is over, and then I'm going to put it in the comments on
that
this,
acronym.
Of course,
Yeah,
because I forget off the top of my head. But essentially, for chronic conditions, right? It was accelerated funding or additional enhanced funding for people who had chronic conditions, because the methodology being, well, it takes more money and dollars and effort to manage a chronic person with these very complex chronic conditions than a regular healthy person. From a premise perspective, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? But reality was, it wasn't really clear what really qualified people, and plans didn't do a great job of putting those guardrails in place and doing a great job of delivering those benefits too, and it became very convoluted. And so then there were a lot of people getting SSBCI benefits that didn't qualify. Also, people were using it as a selling mechanism to sell people on a plan that fully did not qualify for it. So what they've done now is CMS has changed it in the call letter and went to the carriers to say, nope, you can't just add them to your plans. You have to submit to us a bibliography and findings, and you have to have all this data and information and studies and outcomes showing us how this proposed benefit is going to actually have a reasonable outcome on their health and make it better for them. So the fact that they have to go through all that work and do all that, I just feel like it's probably not going to happen, and it pretty much has killed the SSBCI. For the most part.
and with the funding cuts and things like that, and it's special supplemental benefits for the chronically ill, right? And I actually am fine with it, because I think the SSBCI benefits have kind of been a pain in the butt to sell, and they've caused pain points.
It caused a lot of CTMs. It caused a lot of confusions from the brokers. It caused confusions from the consumers. So I completely understand. I am fine completely too, and I kind of was bothered when they rolled out SSBCI anyway, and just said, why don't they put more emphasis in an actual chronic, like a CSNP plan, and just put more focal point there.
So I do think the SSBCIs will survive, but they'll be retooled and be, more importantly, integrated in the new focus of chronic plans, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But just to kind of quickly, the leads thing, right? Because the leads thing was a big deal as well.
Let's end with that.
Yeah,
let's talk more then about, before we go to that, I want to talk about, because you were just talking about SSBCI.
Let's talk about leads on the next one, because that's a whole thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the DSNP and the lookalikes, because I think these are big deals.
And the future and the HEI.
And the FIDEs and the HIDEs. So I think those are the other things that stuck out to me, and I think that there's just been such a pivot back and forth. It's just like they can't figure out what they want to do. I actually really liked it when we moved the dual special election code that was year-round and every month to a quarterly thing, and then also started restricting people who were flagged with high abusers or narcotic users. I think that those were all steps in the right direction. And I think now in this call letter, they're moving. So those of you listen, if you don't know what we're talking about, your dual that dual election code, to move people and do a plan change, you can do once a quarter, and it's only for the first 3 quarters of the year, right? And you can't use it in the 4th quarter.
Because then it's AEP.
Just use the AEP. Well, now they're changing it back to where every month you have an election code to move if you're dual eligible, which, what is that going to do? It's going to cause more friction, more movement. People are going to change plan to plan. Now you're going to have the home health agency that wants to sell your client DME equipment that's going to be moving them, and you're going to have the doctor's offices that get higher reimbursement rates for this payer versus that payer moving them. You're going to have all that movement, and the result is that the health insurance companies will not have that life long enough to get claims data to start actually managing them. And that's a population that they're struggle bugs. They really do struggle navigating the system anyway, and they typically are a little more complex than a normal person, and it's just going to make it harder for a health insurance company to be a health insurance company and keep them healthy and manage it. So I think that's a huge loss for the industry. If any regulators or people are listening to it, I think it's a terrible mistake with the monthly.
Yeah, back in the day, you were lucky if you retained a dual live on your books for 6 months, because people would go knock these low income housing. They'd illegally knock doors and change everybody every month to a different plan. And
also, if you're an agent trying to run and grow your business, it makes it harder for you. More maintenance, more babysitting to your book of business. And if you're an investor or anybody in the finance side, it ruins your LTVs, and it's going to affect your persistency.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because it's at direct odds with what supposedly they're trying to do with this these managed care plans and this coordinated care. And what you want is they want you to be able to manage these unique conditions and these social determinants of health and all of these chronic conditions together. And how does letting somebody change their plan every freaking month allow for that to happen when you've got different networks and different doctors and different administration involved? That just seems like a completely at odds with what they're trying to do. And then going through this, they talk all sorts about FIDEs, which are fully integrated duals, and HIDEs, which are highly integrated duals. And then they talk a lot about C-SNPs, IE SNPs, institutional equivalent, chronic, special needs plans, special needs. So SNPs are going to be, not only are they here to stay, but they are going to be exploding, right?
More plans. So we've talked about it on the podcast many times too, is just, we talked about the number of just plans available in a marketplace. And especially you look at Southern California, parts of Texas, Florida, Washington. I mean, you start going through it and the number, look, choice is good. Like I am, I love it when consumers have.
You were trying to find a way to say not pro-choice. Libertarian, I'm just like, no, I love that people have choices, but I mean, come options,
on.
Yeah.
Do you really need 162 plans to choose? No. And so I've been a big proponent too of, when this is presented to Congress too, and all the friction of these consumers, and going back to the root of all of it, the health plans have as much or more to do with this than the broker does. And I've said it many times because they introduce this full portfolio of so many freaking different plans. And is there really that much of a delineation from this plan to that plan? No. Usually it's because they get sideways on their financials or they can't compete. And so they're introducing new plans. And so here it goes again, where I hate to tell all you brokers out there listening, plan on a lot more plans, because what is that going to do to? So now it's good. You're going to be seeing more IE SNPs, the institutional equivalent plans. You're going to see more of the HIDEs. You're going to see more FIDEs. And the lookalike plans now, too, which are coming back. So now I'm just thinking of the deluge of all these more plans that are going to get filed in all these new marketplaces and what that means for your clients who are also going to be in the shopping environment this coming fall, who are going to get their annual notice of change with their decreased benefits, and the amount of shopping and switching and movement that is going to happen. This AEP is probably more than I have probably ever seen in my 17 years in the business.
Yeah, and so what's going to happen, guys, if you're an agent out there, you're a broker, it is going to, as sophisticated and high caliber of an agent as you already need to be, you're going to have to be even smarter and more sophisticated. And you are going to have to be able to not just know what a dual is, what a D-SNP is, but you're going to have to know
a traditional dual.
Yep.
You're going to have to know what the difference is with an actual lookalike.
Yep.
And what is the difference between a HIDE and what is the difference between a FIDE?
Well, not only that, then there's also different within those duals. There's different levels of eligibility, usually a partial or a full, right? And then there's going to be PACE plans probably expanding. There's going to be IE SNPs, regular iSNPs, not institution equivalent, but actual iSNPs. And so what's going to happen is eligibility for these plans is going to become really, really complicated, because we're already seeing right now with the change hack that we talked about, how much that affected eligibility for these plans. It's going to be very, very complicated to be able to find out who is qualified for these very narrow plans.
These particular types of plans. And the technology companies that are doing it, like a Sunfire, a DRX, or any of these other companies out there, or Health Sherpa that's now getting into the space, when these very particular plan have these qualifications or criteria, whether it be chronic with a verification form, or whether it be the IE and meeting the ADLs, the activity of daily living stuff, to implement whatever that criteria is into the technology enrollment process is going to be a huge pain.
Yeah, and it's an extra step and more work for the agents,
and
right?
More money to implement, and more technology. And how many of them are going to say, no, you can't use that tool because we're in development process and it's going to take us 6 to 12 months to even develop it. So here's your paper form, or call this phone number to do the verification.
Well, we have that IE SNP with United Healthcare right now that we absolutely love. That's fantastic. But even that takes an extra, you have to fill out the form on the website to have them call your client and be able to do the interview process and then wait. It is an extra little step. Now, there's pros and cons to this, right? If you do put people on these right plans, the matching up and the qualifications may be a little bit more. But if you coach your clients really well, and they know that, they've kind of gone through this process to get on that, you should be able to have good retention on that.
I do think it's going to be a lot more work to put them on there and qualify and do the work. But once they're on there, I do think that those particular people are going to have a lot better persistency.
Yeah, and with that extra step, there should be less easy flipping and switching. I think the duals may be, still in jeopardy, but we are leaning into more chronics and the IE SNPs, and we're going to see an explosion of those. So
yeah, so just, brace yourself. That's what you're getting into. And like I said, I have a lot of opinions about this. It's frustrating to me to see all this, especially like happening all simultaneously. The last part that we kind of mentioned, but we haven't talked about, is the lookalikes. And this is one that I really, really struggle with and don't like, because candidly, we were already working to kind of eliminate and get rid of the dual or the lookalikes. Because when we say lookalike, we're talking about a traditional Medicare Advantage plan that is actually not a dual plan, right? And usually to have a dual plan, whether it's a traditional dual, a HIDE or a FIDE, that insurance company has to also have a contract with the state Medicaid, right? And these people that's why they call them a dual, because they have Medicare and Medicaid. And the whole idea is that you're putting them on a specialized plan that actually gives them less friction, usually gives them a service coordinator, helps kind of coordinate all those two payers between the state and the federal, Medicare and Medicaid. We can talk about all this in another podcast, but there's a reason that those are the right plan for people. When a company just comes in and files a lookalike, it's not that, and agents don't understand it, and the beneficiary doesn't understand it, and all they're really getting is a Medicare Advantage plan, and there's not that coordination together. So I like the fact that they were getting rid of the lookalikes, and now to say, oh, just kidding, we've been sunsetting these for 2 years, now we're actually going to bring them back. And there was this threshold back a few years ago where they said, hey, you can run a lookalike plan, but there was this 80% threshold put in there where they said, if more than 20% of the 80-20, about if it exceeds that and more of them are actually dual members or traditional members, then you can't continue to operate this plan anymore. You'll have to sunset it, or we'll force you to do a plan exit. Well, now they're actually even loosening it more to where they're moving it to a 70-30 ratio this coming year for 2025, and then they're going to make it even easier to a 60-40 in 2026. So I think it's a step in the wrong direction completely. And it also allows a carrier to come into a state and operate in a space without actually having to, on the other hand, provide valuable Medicaid services to the state, to those demographics there too.
Yep. And so like Dan said, the end result of all this is going to be more complicated, more education on the broker's behalf. More plans are going to be available. So there is going to be another level of sophistication in the industry. But then just to kind of wrap it up, the last part about this, and it goes in alignment with that, are the health equity index, right? And this is they spend, I think it's 400 pages talking about health equity. And so SRF. So these are new buzzwords that you guys really need to get yourselves.
It was social determinants of health a few years ago.
Yep. But now these are health equity indexes, and just like the risk factors and the scores of these plans, they're going to have to follow these health risk indexes and go with what are called SRFs, which are social risk factors. So things like being low income, being disabled, being gender identity, things like that are all going to be SRFs, social risk factors, that are going to play important parts in the fundings for these plans and the development of these plans and benefits going forward. So that's a whole new ballgame, and it's almost like, we're trying to solve all of these, we're adding all these complicated, nuanced measures into these health insurance plans to try to have a special tailored plan and situation for all these different unique situations. And it seems like we've got a lot of opportunities and complications going forward for these types of plans.
Yep, and you're going to see, again, more expense because there's going to be higher reimbursements for the indexes and the numbers, and the carriers or the plans that are performing well are going to get higher payments. So you're also going to see, as we've seen, risk management, companies really thrive. and do that for like the value-based care and those reimbursement rates for those HEDIS measures, you're going to see entities popping up managing that exact criteria.
Yeah, and
those are done annually, right? I forget, like reading in there, like it makes a determination on their payments.
Yeah, what's crazy about all this is, there's still hundreds of extra pages that talk about, skilled nursing facilities, and we haven't even got into the Part D changes. This thing is really a behemoth. So the compensation thing that we spent a lot talking about is one thing, but we're not going to really know how all of this affects the industry until we look back 4 or 5 years from now, like we are, with MACRA, where we're 9 years later and go, wow, that really changed the industry pretty substantially. Wow. This change is going to change our industry fairly substantially going forward. And so with that, like we said, and it's not all doom and gloom. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for enterprising, entrepreneurial, hardworking agents to understand these opportunity, leverage all these changes, and really establish yourself as an expert in your field and invaluable. And so,
and I would add one last thing before we wrap is, and this was also a conversation I had with many people, is, well, hey, depending on the election this year and who wins, it might change some of this. And true, it's very true. Let's say, obviously the document, it mentions the Biden-Harris administration, right? Let's just say we all know that there's going to be this repeating showdown of Trump and Biden again this year, this fall. Let's say Trump gets in office. Is he going to his administration going to scrap a lot of these things? Probably.
Yep.
But you can't just wave the wand, scrap it, and you're done and go back. It's already going to be down the tracks. Things are already going to be implemented. It's going to take anywhere from a year to 2 to 3 years for whatever that administration is going to do to be implemented. So that's not like I'm not going to worry about that because I think we're going to have new leadership and that's not going to affect me. That's not the right attitude or response to all this. Just as like a real side note there. I will also say it's going to be a very interesting thing with politics this year. And we try to stay out of politics on the podcast, but candidly, we're in a business where we're selling government payments are going to insurance carriers. So, we have to pay attention to politics. And I will also say that, think of it this way, with Medicare, all these voters too are going to be getting their annual notice of change of their benefits this fall and seeing how they're significantly getting reduced. And that absolutely is going to impact their sentiment and how they vote. And that population votes very heavily. And at the same time, you have the ACA, where we've been dealing with all these very enhanced subsidies that are on the table to get scrapped and go away too. So if that goes away, that funding for the ACA, then people are going to have higher premiums and less subsidies on their marketplace plans. Again, this fall, right around voting season. So
yeah, we could do a whole other discussion on that, the ACA side of things, and how that's all the political environment around that and the potential changes. And, for all you considering, oh man, I got to jump first into ACA right now. If things are good for you, you might want to pump the brakes on that agency-wide and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, so I brought it before we wrap of just, wow, what an interesting thing it is and what a cat and mouse game. And there's somewhat of they're kind of punting the football back and forth a little bit. And I think both camps, the Republicans and the Democrats, both have kind of their strategy with that. And they're trying to see how they can use this to come out the other side. And it's definitely going to be a huge part of, the strategy this fall. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so as you can see, guys, lots going on. The takeaway is pay attention, right? Educate yourselves. Hopefully you guys are learning this stuff. It's, you're not just tuning out while you're driving, listening to voices or whatever you're doing, but this is the kind of stuff that it's not super fun to always be reading government documents and things like that. I spent 8 hours reading this thing when it dropped, but these are the types of things that'll separate you from your competitors. These are the type of things that are going to allow you to not just survive this industry, but thrive. So again, not doom and gloom. Look for the opportunities. Look for the ways that you can get better and implement these things to better service your clients.
Yep. Catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Agent